country. I'm delighted this afternoon to have on the panel practitioners and those who think about the visual arts and write on it. So may I please have the pleasure of having on the panel Ratnottama Sengupta, Dipali Bhattacharya, Chintan Girish Modi, Adip Dutta, and Pinaki Dasgupta. Contemporary art, Whither Next. All of us who are seated here today, much like most of you seated there, practice the visual arts. We talk about it, we think about it, we write about it. There's long been talk that the visual arts, particularly in this country, finds itself in crisis. Is this true? Perhaps not. That's one of the issues we're going to talk about. Where does the present lie so far as contemporary art is concerned? What does the future hold? And where is it going? So I'd like to start off with Adip Dutta because he's got a presentation to make next door and he very kindly consented to attend even with this commitment. So Adip, over to you for your thoughts on contemporary art Whither Next.
Hello everybody. But before I start, let me thank Kolkata Foundation and the topic seems contemporary art is what we talk about, what we know of, but the main twist is contemporary art and the direction it is taking. You see, being a practitioner, I will not be concentrating on the technique, the mode of production, but rather the site of projection of contemporary art today. Most of these, quote unquote, these art fairs, art biennales, and also some of these, very important platforms like Frieze Art, Venice Biennale, etc., etc. These have become the most important. Please don't take this as my sort of a critical stance, but I'll only be projecting what is coming up as contemporary art. So these sites, before we understand what is contemporary art, we need to know what these sites are. Earlier, the site of art projection were the institutions, and by saying so, it's not that I don't mean that these platforms have not become important art institutions, but by institutions I mean institutions that were located, situated at some sort of real situations. I teach at an institution and I know of that people who are involved, engaged in this, in an institution is this, they are sort of located at situations which are quite real. But platforms that I see today, most of it, in a way, are manufactured. If you go to these sort of art fairs today, be it in India or be it in Bangladesh or be it elsewhere, they look alike. And most arts that are being projected sort of speak the same way. And that is, I believe, one danger that we get to see. I don't say that, they are not topical. They don't address the issues that, are important. But what is most dangerous is the way they sort of are being projected. So that is what I, as an artist, I'm worried about it, because I'm also part of that entire process. So to me, the process of production is kind of guided by the sites that are being taking the responsibility to project them. So we need to seriously think about these sites. Most of them, definitely they have a strong, a kind of a history they're dealing with. There's kind of a political base to it, social, cultural base to it. But again, since most of them are being regulated by a handful of individuals, they've begun to look alike. So that is what is most dangerous, a situation that I get to see. However negative it may sound, and I'm sorry to start with it, but I'm sure, there are other in the panel and they'll take it up in a different way. So the conversation will roll and we'll get to see other perspective. But this is my perspective, and I'll come back to it, as and when questions come up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adip. So much of a muchness is essentially what Adip Dutta is telling us about. And the fact that the contemporary art scene is very much driven by the market, by fairs, which are curated and organized by the same people, and end up looking very much alike. Moving on to an educator's perspective on things, may I now invite Dipali Bhattacharya to speak.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a very difficult kind of a topic, because neither can you be negative nor can you be very positive about the entire situation. Being a teacher, being an educator at the government college for 30 years, I was just thinking that how did I start and what does that I'm mentioning the college because that is one of the oldest college in the country, and it all began there. British came and they established 4 colleges in 4 parts of India, and not to create artists but to create draftsmen. It was the beginning, creating draftsmen, and to just the flora and the fauna and the monument, everything was documented by those draftsmen, because it was very difficult for them to bring artists from their land, and it started there, but it didn't stay there. Gradually all these 4 art colleges, Lahore, Chennai and JJ and us, Government Art College, they started moving in a different direction. So I have seen 30 years of this, my tenure in the college, and I have seen huge change. As Adip was saying that, when we started, not even 30, I was a student there. I was 7 years, few years of national scholarship and 5 years course. So 37 years of my personal experience. So the whole thing has evolved and changed, and things are so different right now. When we started, this college believes in teaching art because it had a draftsman background, possibly study work and portraiture and landscape and handling oil painting, all kinds of things. And then gradually what has happened, we still believe in that because of the simple reason we believe that not everybody is becoming an artist in future, so we give them certain degree of knowledge so that they can earn their bread when they pass out from the college. They can be a good illustrator, they can be a portrait painter, that kind of thing. But out of that, people, those who have to break through, they do that. In master degree, they start experimenting, they're doing. So this process goes on. Coming to contemporary art, the most important thing that we see that in our lifetime only, we have seen this social media, right? Unless and until, when I visited London first time, it was awe. I was awed with the original paintings. Today, a student do not have to go through that process. They just click a button and they see the entire National Gallery. They click one button, they see the Impressionist work, the whole of Louvre, they can see. So the whole thing, as Adip was saying, that, it is a kind of, everybody has got the similar kind of expression. I think the social media has done this in a very big way. Well, the positive side of this is, it all happened in 80s and 90s, the group of artists, those who, when we all know that Van Gogh died poor. He had nothing. Rembrandt died poor. But later on in auction, people became rich. So this movement of installation came. So the thing is, I don't know, today those who are doing installations and using different material, whether they realize that it's part of a movement, I don't have any idea, because when I see the art fair, I see that, breaking norms. Painting is not restricted in the wall anymore. People are trying to use different media, different kind of paint, experimenting. That is there, but in spite of that, there is a oneness all over the world. He is absolutely correct. I went to see Bangladesh Biennale, and I thought, well, maybe I'm in Australia, because just prior to that I visited Australia and saw this Sydney Museum. So works in Sydney Museum was so similar to kind of, not only that, thematically they are same. My objection here is, I always think that artist is a philosopher. It's kind of a mirror. Whatever is happening around us, that reflects. I have no objection in style or anything. What I feel that when you are a painter or a sculptor or an installation artist or a photographer, you should have some link with the with your background, the root. If that is reflected in your expression, that makes your art very special. I think that part is lacking somewhere. Somebody recently in our gallery, yesterday the show opened, there are certain paintings which is so derivative. You can, this has been taken from this artist, that artist. So something that is popular, young artists have got a tendency of just doing it in that style. So for me, I think it should have some kind of, you can take a style, but it has to be yours. Finally, you have to make it yours. Add yourself into it. Then it becomes very, very special. And that's it, and also, what is contemporary? Whatever is happening today, that is contemporary. And tomorrow, something else is contemporary. So I look forward to thinking artists. Some of them are here in our country, doing good work, thinking, writing, reading. I always look forward, I might sound like a teacher, but I always look forward to an artist who reads a lot, who is aware, who takes things from, issues are there in that person's, not necessarily a red flag, but there should be something that has got a statement. The society, not directly. My teacher, Ganesh Haloi, I was telling him one day that you are only painting, so much happening around you. So you are painting landscape, I don't mind at all, but then is there any reflection of everything that is happening? Why don't you have some kind of, he says that my strokes, my colors, well justified. There's not necessarily you have to have a protest march or something in your painting, but then I think that is lacking, People are stuck in a style, even the youngsters. You start selling. You become a selling artist and you don't move out of that. The only reason is people don't read. People don't read the newspaper these days. That's the only reason. One should start reading, one should start keeping their eyes open, one should realize that what is happening around us. Then their art becomes more complete. This is my general opinion, and that part is lacking. There is a general tendency of taking, because of the internet and everything, taking things from outside, and hence, as my young friend says, that there is a tar of sameness everywhere. So whatever we see, it's a kind of similar kind of output. Thank you. I hand it over to Anirudh.
Rootedness and reflection of identity, derivation and the problems that stem from derivation, which in turn stems from having access to a whole lot of global information, is what Dipali Bhattacharya has been speaking about. And this throws up, and as she brought up the point about engaged, socially and culturally engaged art, reminds one of Picasso's famous quote about Matisse, that as the Germans marched into Paris, Matisse painted his 3,000th goldfish. But on that note, may I hand over to Ratnottama Sengupta, please.
Thank you, all of you, for being here. And I have been, the last 2 days, I've been talking over the radio on the impact of AI on the entertainment industry. Obviously, in a society, and particularly cinema, does not live in or is not born out in isolation. And cinema is an extension of visual art. So I have, in my talks, also been dwelling on the impact of technological advances in the past on art. So I'll bring a little bit of that here. All of you, apnara shobai, all of you are very art educated and at a much higher level than a general audience for the radio. Still, bear with me, because I'm going to start with the impact photography had on art. It changed the entire concept of art. It no longer, in fact, it had to be as unreal as it had to be real before. Realistic became something that you consciously went away from, whether it was abstraction, whether it was impressionism, whether it was expressionism, and of course, not just technological advance, probably also the history of World War I and also most certainly World War II, where humans were burning humans. That impacted the imagination, the being of artists who shuddered at the thought of creating humans as humans. And they went away from it, and of course also technological advances in terms of graphic arts, in terms of calendar art, all of that impacted the practice of art, not only in Europe but in our own land, where art was bought in the pilgrimage sites, it flourished in the bazaars and so on. So technological art advance has always impacted art, and contemporary art, certainly after industrialization or part industrialized art and so on and so forth, kept happening until we came to installation, which in a way tried to go back to roots, as Dipali just mentioned, because our identity is in our roots, which is why after independence, when Europe was looking away from realism, our artists, primarily Shantiniketan artists, were looking back to our roots. I will now come to the term AI, artificial intelligence, how is that going to impact? Of course, with all online, OTT, digital, whatever we say, advances, humans have been subjected to fakes, to the practice of corrupting thoughts, corrupting economic thoughts of not only art, but also in real life. I mean, people are constantly getting calls that, you've done this wrong, so you have to do this and do that, and they're being subjected. So we have to be cautious when we tread forward. But artificial intelligence, should we read AI as absolute imagination? Should we rather opt to go above, like Dali did once? He went beyond the reality of human form, and he said the psychological reality of a human being is my art, and thus created a new form of art. Maybe we have to once more, maybe that is the challenge, when AI within 3 seconds is giving you what it took maybe 3 months certainly, if not 3 years of research in the library for us to know earlier. Quick fix solutions cannot help an artist. That is my conclusion for this part. I'm not going to let go of the mic so easily. So there's another area where we have to ask ourselves, what next? And I would talk about public art. One point of time, public art was major, particularly in a country like India, because temples were the platforms of art, and that was public art. Of course, the darbars, eventually the Mughal darbars, the architecture of the buildings, yes, they were public art, but paintings inside or the marble work, jali or whatever, miniatures, everything was public art in a sense. Subsequently, what has happened, of course, the European cities had vast parks. Their architecture again was something else. Their palaces, some of the ones in Germany, in England, they themselves, but also the churches, they were public art. But then they also had the parks. They had huge sculptures, portraits, whatever, in public places. In India, what has happened? Public art, the whole concept, especially in cities like Calcutta, Panch Rastar Mode, Shat Rastar Mode, wherever we've had some form, whether it's Netaji or Don Bosco or whatever, where is the grandeur? Where is the imposing presence of the figures on them? Kala Ghoda in Bombay, I've grown up in Bombay and I went to college in Kala Ghoda many years ago. There used to be this beautiful king riding on a horse. The horse was imposing, if not just the king. What has happened to it? We don't have these. Of course, we got the public art places in when the metro came. And Calcutta was the first city to get metro. And it was fascinating to see, the relevance of the Kalighat painting at Kalighat station, Tagore's writings at Sarovar or wherever, Rabindra Sadan, and so on. What has happened to it now? Even the names, people don't half the time relate to the geography of the stations. and the art on the platforms, on the wherever, on the walls. I doubt if any art is happening there. The third thing is the institutions. Dipali is much better and she's already talked about it. But I think the institutions themselves are in a bit of a dilemma because so many of the institutions, not just art institutions, universities, the students come in to learn and the very next day they start teaching the teacher to teach. That has been a phenomenon more, in other institutions, perhaps not so much in government art. But then with AI, with online, with OTT, with digital, with so much available at the press of a button, how much are the students of the future going to respect and learn what will be the position of Master Moshai? Shantiniketan had Master Moshai, Government College had Master Moshai. What's going to happen to them? MS University, I know, had figures like Manida and Shankoda. Gari, Delhi College also had stalwart figures who were kind of revered figures. I wonder whether that same kind of reverence for a practitioner who's grown up not only in terms of years but also in terms of history, in terms of practice, in terms of communicating, passing the baton on. So these are the three areas, and of course there's one other major area which perhaps Anirudh or Pinaki would talk about, that is the economics of art. Economics of art is such a fluid space that we really need to think about it. Dipali talked about bringing up artists, artisans, providing them the education to make a livelihood. Art galleries took over from institutions in a certain sense. Art auctions took over at one point of time. Art magazines flourished at one point of time. But somehow art auctions have lost their fizz. Art galleries are more focused on making good money. Art magazines have diluted their charter. Very few are there nationally, obviously with online becoming supreme, print going out, because I personally feel print is where you see the thing before your eyes, where art would have flourished. Somehow online is not the same experience. So in future, how will the artists negotiate the economics of it in the age of tariffs? Is it going to be going beyond the geographical boundaries to be able to exist, to be able to make a mark? Or do we go back to our roots to create an identity, a stronger identity? Thank you.
Ratnottama Sengupta makes some very significant points about AI, public art, the role of institutions, and of course the market, that dreaded bugbear which looms large and has a role to play no matter what you do in the visual arts. And I would now like to invite Chintan Girish Modi to make his points.
Thank you, Anirudh. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge KIFALC and Yapanchitra. I hope I got the pronunciation right. Thank you for inviting me. It's always a delight to be in Kolkata, and especially at this festival. Well, everyone's told us enough about what's there to despair, so I'm going to inject some hope into this conversation. What I am really interested in is looking at how artists are responding to the ecological crisis. So when we look at Whither Next, I think that's definitely something to look out for. I feel like statistics tend to be impersonal and advocacy tends to be alarmist, but what artists do is they help us process how we feel. And there's enough writing coming up around climate anxiety and environmental grief. Artists make an effort to look at how landscapes are being transformed and the effect they have on us. I remember coming to Kolkata sometime last year and seeing the work of this young artist from Betpukur, about 100 kilometers from Kolkata. After he moved to Kolkata, he felt that his relationship with nature was changing in a big way. And when he went back home, completing his education, he found that there was a decline in the communal role of ponds and other water bodies in his own village. And there was a sense of mourning, a sense of grief about what had happened, about this distancing between humans and nature, humans and other species, that expressed itself very beautifully through art. And no amount of research articles or data can really capture the emotion of this, which I think artists can do really well. I'd like to also quickly mention a few other examples of art that I've seen recently that responds to the ecological crisis. I don't know if many of the people here have been to the Kochi Biennale, but one of the things that strikes you as soon as you go there is KB Shajit's 50 feet long mural. Now the mural actually, the scale strikes you and then you realize the scale is also related to the scale of the loss that we're experiencing right now. He comes from the Malabar region and this this mural is a response to what has been lost. He grew up in Malabar, really spending time with the forest, which becomes a part of his mindscape as well. And this painting invites us to look at the forest not as a resource that we extract from. I mean, I'm sure everyone's been following what's happening with the National Green Tribunal and the crime almost of what's happening in the Andamans. So when you look at a work like this, it also makes you think of what you're experiencing in the news, what you're experiencing inside your heart, and trying to bring all of that together. The other work that really struck me was when Buddha stopped smiling. When I was at the Serendipity Arts Festival last year in December, Chinky Shukla, a Delhi-based photographer, put out a show which is looks at the human and environmental costs of the nuclear tests that happened in Pokhran. One during Mrs. Gandhi's rule and later during Vajpayee, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So the kind of effect that has had, people with cancer, women having miscarriages, water contamination. When these things happen, in the news cycle, these tend to be looked at in celebratory terms because also we have an India versus Pakistan situation. But artists give us a moment to pause and not look only at the immediate, look at things more long term. So this artist went there and she looked at the impact that has happened over time, what it has meant for people living there versus people elsewhere who are celebrating. I'm trying to give you examples from different parts of the country because it's useful to look at specific artists than talk about art in a general way. There's another Delhi-based artist whose work I really enjoyed. I saw it at Art Mumbai, which I did not like. I did not like Art Mumbai very much because it was just more like a food court for art. That's how I describe it. But even if you don't like everything, sometimes you find like a spot of brightness somewhere and then you hold on to it. That's what I do. So Digbajay Khatwa's work was interesting to me because it shows how barren everything looks when a city is just made of cement and concrete. But the plant and animal kingdom, they try to assert their presence. So whether it's monkeys trying to sneak into a house and eat banana from there, or plants trying to grow out of crevices and take over a physical space. So we tend to think of the plant and the animal kingdom as intruders into our space, but the artist invites us to think of how we might be introduced in their space as well. So I kind of like that. And the other artist I want to quickly mention is Niroj Satpathy. So I've been doing some reading around around caste and environment. Mukul Sharma's work really stood out to me. He teaches at Ashoka University in Sonipat. He talks about how his most recent book is called Dalit Ecologies. He talks about how in our country the environmental discourse tends to almost entirely leave out the question of who handles waste, because that is determined by where you are in the caste hierarchy, right? So he writes very extensively about Nekchand's garden in Chandigarh, for example. What is left, we often talk about it in terms of, recycling and upcycling and, talk about him in contrast to Corbusier, but we don't talk about how he came from the Mali caste. And that has a role to play in how he dealt with waste, which then became garden and then, celebrated nationally. But Niroj Satpathy's work I mentioned, he's at Kochi Biennale again. He used to work as, I'm just going to consult my notes, I want to get the right designation. He worked as a night supervisor at the with the Municipal Corporation of Delhi. So somebody who had to encounter waste every day, right? He got material out of landfills and used that as the installation that he's put up at the Kochi Biennale. So that again pushes us to think about how, what is it that we think of as worthy of discarding, and what is it that can be repurposed. How much of consumption and excess is also related to where you are in the caste system, not just in capitalism. So I have found this engaging to look at art from an ecological perspective. Also, I would say the work of Kulpreet Singh, he showed at Gallery Mirchandani in Bombay last year, but some of, an iteration of his work was also presented at the Kochi Biennale. Kulpreet Singh responds very strongly to two political moments in India's history. One is the Green Revolution. Right now, the Green Revolution is being talked about because of the centennial year of the father of the Green Revolution. But Kulpreet Singh reminds us that the Green Revolution also led to over-salinization of soil, and there were other things. I mean, the carcinogenic effects of what has happened to the soil has also been talked about. So, in this celebration, let's also look at how people locally have been harmed by it. And the other thing Kulpreet Singh looks at in his work is the farm laws recently, which had to be repealed because of the push from the farmers. And he is, somebody talked about how, like the artistic training, right? He's also a farmer who became an artist. So what happens when you look at questions of or nepotism in the arts, but also like where did you study from? What does it really mean to be self-taught? Being self-taught in a village versus in a city, in say the metros versus someplace in Punjab. To conclude, I would just say that I share with the other panelists that sense of despair in some way too, because I find that there is a lot of cleverness that is seeping into art spaces, and I don't enjoy that at all. I find that annoying, sometimes even disgusting, because it seems that people who've come to engage with art are being robbed of the opportunity to experience something viscerally, to experience with their senses, to experience without this over-curated sort of nonsense where you're told that you need to use a particular vocabulary in order to access art. That is almost like, the Pandit or the Qazi coming in the middle. It's like an intermediary that's not needed. In fact, you should be able to experience art without having done an MFA or a course in art history or art curation. This is the problem we finding. I write a lot about books, and I find that this is the problem with novels as well. So many people who are writing novels have done an art history, have done an MFA in writing, which is why there's sounding alike as we heard about art. But thanks once again for the opportunity to speak to you, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Chintan, for these thought-provoking images and ideas about ecological engagement on the part of artists, and also bringing to the point that there is such a thing as over-curation. And I think that's a problem we faced, where a particular grammar and a particular language has evolved, and those without access to that language or grammar have been deliberately left out, as it were. Finally, I'd like to turn to Pinaki Dasgupta for his thoughts, who's braved ecological trouble of his own through in the form of a snowstorm to come here to be with us today. Pinaki, we'd love to have your thoughts on where contemporary art is headed.
Awesome. Thanks, Anirudh. And good afternoon, everyone. Like Anirudh said, I'm not worried about whether I will put you to sleep. I'm worried that I may get into sleep because it's early morning in New York. I just landed yesterday. I'm still a bit jet lagged. I'm a practitioner of art, so I may bring a different point of view into this discussion. But before I get there, just a quick shout out to Pravalda and Varnali to invite me here. It's a great honor to be with you. Calcutta is still the intellectual capital, not just of India, but probably on a global scale. And the people that I shared this dais is a testament to that. And I'm very honored to be with you all. From my perspective, I'm basically a technologist, but I started art a bit late in I don't have an MFA. The way I practice art is, it's an atelier concept where it is more hands-on. You learn art by practicing, actually by doing it. And so my guru is, I don't know if you're familiar with Chari. He was, I think, late 19th century. He was a professor in Royal Institute of Art in London, and Edward Lantery actually tried to write what is considered as the Bible of sculpting, where he didn't talk about how to build the final sculptures, but he tried to do it inside out. So right from building an armature and then building all the forms, the relationship between various landmarks in the anatomy. And then, of course, the final, what you see as the emotion on a sculpture. So I actually practice figurative art, and that's what I am thrilled, and that's where I feel my mojo. But coming back to the theme, the contemporary art, Whither Next, and having lived in outside of Calcutta and particularly in the US for last 3 decades, I kind of stumbled upon the word whither, and I'm like, I didn't hear that word whither, and then I realized it's a 900 AD English. It talks about the destination, and then last night I realized Anirudh actually was, and it's no coincidence that he had an English education, and he actually was in London. But the point is, where is it going? And I was kind of trying to think, how do I define art? And one of which I define art is like, chasing a shadow, right? As you chase the shadow, you wonder where the source of the light. And as the source of the light changes, the shadow changes. So it's not just one prism, that art is this, monolithic body, and there is nothing outside that boundary. To me, artists see from their prism, and each one of us have diverse point of view, divergent point of views. We have different life experience, and we get warmed up by different ideas. Some could be climatic, some could be religious, some could be, beauty, aesthetics, so on and so forth. So from that prism, there is no one definition of art. The old craftsmanship of India, that is also an art, and someone who is, building installation to address resistance. For example, if you try to bring the framework of what they call PIA, power, identity, and resistance, and particularly if you see from New York perspective, the power, identity, and resistance, that framework becomes very, very important, because some of the artists in New York are today rising up to, the issue of identity. The queer, the sex is no more a binary, it's in a spectrum. And some of the artists are actually the racial inequality, financial inequality, and artists are addressing that. Artists are actually addressing to the power. Power actually corrupts, and sometimes, not always. And if you see, for centuries, the art that was created is created by the power. So whether it's a church, whether it's the wealthy businessman, or it could be the state-sponsored art, which could be propaganda. Even in India today, you see, I don't know how many feet, 100 feet statues of, certain political, and I'm not saying this is wrong or right, I'm saying that's where the state sponsors art. And of course, that's a propaganda. And then there are resistance where people are standing up and they are building their own. So where I'm going with this, weaving thoughts, in essence, is art is not monolithic, it's not one defined, characteristics, but it's a divergent views from different section of our society. And as I see from the prism of the diaspora, a Prabashi kind of thought process, I see that particularly in India, we are trying to break away from our colonial past. We are trying to break away from the Mughals' art or that philosophy. So today's artists are, it's the chaos that you see on the roads in India. I think intellectually that chaotic mindset is still there. And so in one side, the tension is to break away from the colonial past, create our own identity, but at the same time, the globalizations are happening. AI is a major disruptors. And so all these various angles are kind of sipping into what we are creating as art. And I think that's really the current scenario. So I don't want to kind of prescribe the art is going in one particular direction. I think the artists of whether it's India or it's in New York or Florence or London or Paris, they are all addressing the theme of PIA in some shape and form in the contemporary world. But at the same time, the Indian rasa theory of beauty, aesthetics, and more importantly, emotions. There are artists who are still creating those emotions today, and that would also stay side by side. So it will be juxtaposition of new ideas, new forms, new metals. I am also using 3D printing, for example, and so that's kind of a new age way of presenting our ideas. But at the same time, an AI could be alternate imagination. That's another way to look at AI. So it's alternate imagination that we could create. So that's kind of my current thought process. I could add more to this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pinaki. Power, identity, resistance, the three pillars on which Pinaki feels contemporary art practice is based, and that combined with older ideas on beauty and aesthetics. We have 20 minutes, am I right, Barnali? 5:15. We started at 4, we had 75 minutes. We have to finish by 5. So we've had 15 minutes docked. All right, we've had 15 minutes docked from our session, so which gives me enough time to take a couple of questions if anyone is interested in asking any questions. Yes, sir.
So my name is Sanjay Guho. Can I sit or I have to stand? Okay. So, what I really miss about contemporary art actually when I came back to India, and I mean, I've been for a couple of years outside and then was traveling around the world. Whether I looking at, say, Winwood in Miami or Roro in Phoenix, or maybe, as he said, in Soho in New York, or you go to Madrid. Madrid was missed out in the art galleries. Lovely art display over there. And Florence is, I think Florence is underrated compared to Paris. It's a huge collection. What I really feel India as a place of contemporary art and breeding into it is that in none of the cities we have a place where people can come and spend half a day or full day to see the collection, to see the time that they would love to see that. I mean, recently I traveled to a place very less known as Albuquerque in New Mexico, and I went to Santa Fe, and every places wherever I've been actually.
I'm going to cut you short there for a second. Response to the lack of proper public spaces. Anybody on the panel wants to get back on this? Ratnottama, you were Dipali.
Yeah, that something is missing here. You know, Bengal has got such rich heritage of art, but then it depends on the rulers of this country. They don't pay much attention. We don't have an art gallery. And this particular Kolkata Foundation, International Foundation for Art, Literature and Culture, they actually wanted to do this, make people aware of the fact that it's very important. Art is very important, and we should have a permanent gallery in the city so that one person coming from outside can see the chronology, how it all started, and where are we right now.
No, I would not like to be a static platform. See, two things I was just discussing with Pinaki during the lunch we had together, is that I had a dream actually. I'm still working on it. I couldn't put the blocks together. The year where the students graduate, or the first N+1 year, is where they struggle a lot. They don't have an identity. They are all over the place, but they are massive in terms of intellectual creativity, because they are not binded by, and what they lack is a commercial and economic support, which was mentioned once. So why don't we, or the forum, reach out to the government to allocate a space to say that it will be a rotating place for the passing out graduates or the third year or fourth year students or fifth year students, where they can display it and it moves on.
You for a second, Adip.
You see, I'm part of an institution. I teach at the Rabindra Bharati University. You said that lack of kind of a space, not necessarily a fixed kind of a platform, but there are events, and what the problem lies in the fact that these institutions have become kind of dormant. Most of these institutions, especially the whole idea of subsidized education in India, it's sort of taking kind of a second seat, and that the problem lies because earlier Shantiniketan was a space which was very potent, because the whole idea of institution was on a different league altogether.
May I break in a little bit? I went recently to Shantiniketan. Okay, I wanted to spend a day to see the guys, the students who are working on it actually. I didn't find any place.
I'm going to stop you for a second there. We'll carry on this private conversation later. Ratnottama, you had a response.
When in 1997 India was celebrating 50 years of independence, the biggest happening was an exhibition from the British Museum that came to Delhi and a couple of other places. And the next biggest exhibition in terms of art, I'm only restricting myself to art, was the Bhattacharya that came from Windsor. Now, why am I talking about this? Forget doing something of this scale with what we have in our museums. We don't even, you go to Jhansi, you go to any of our site museums. Our museums are not learning spaces. Shantiniketan, we still go to see the Kala Bhavan, the China Bhavan, the Hindi Bhavan. But what about the people who've come out of Shantiniketan? Shantiniketan has the space, but there is no thought to give a public display space. This is what I was lamenting. And just one more minute. I have been to Berlin and I have been so fortunate to see the decadent art exhibition. Hitler was burning them and they were rescued and they were on display. I mean, I wonder if anywhere in the world, any country in the world is going to put up shows like that. Well, one can go on, but when 100 years of Van Gogh's death, in Amsterdam, the museum had collected works from all over the world. Wherever there was a Van Gogh that was worth displaying.
Yeah, I'll just break in one point I remember.
I'm going to stop you right there. Chintan.
Thank you. I think we should try and expand our imagination when we think of what is art. Art is not only what is found in galleries, exhibitions and museum spaces. As someone who lives in Bombay and comes to Kolkata, I'm often struck by what I see as public art in Kolkata. When I see the art on Mirza Ghalib Street, or when I see murals even on Southern Avenue, where, you know, there are these little images of, you know, some important artistic figures drawn and highlighted. I don't see that very much in other cities or even some of the metro stations. In terms of how museums are engaging with educational outreach, I would actually like to highlight what the erstwhile Prince of Wales, now Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya is doing. They actually have a lot of learning worksheets and educational kits for children to be engaged when they come in and see an exhibition. So parents are not saddled with the responsibility of childcare when they're bringing someone, and they can go see the stuff, and children have activities that are, you know, age appropriate for them to explore the collection of the museum in a way that's tailored to them.
Yeah, I was trying to address the economics part, you know.
Sir, address it later, because we're out of time. The issue is, I think, largely one of the emperor's new clothes. One of the elephants in the room we haven't addressed, and I think most of my fellow panelists were too polite to address, was the fact that there is a whole lot of derivative art which is being passed off as original, particularly in this country. And I think we need to look, and somebody needs to say that this is simply not on. You cannot fool your audience all the time. There are curators and writers who have no idea of what it is that they're writing about. They write jargon, which in most cases makes no sense whatsoever. It's like installation art on a page. You can see the words, but it makes no sense. They're just justifying art which cannot be justified through writing which cannot be justified. I think the time has come for there to be serious criticism. One of the great problems in this country, Ratnottama, I think you'll agree with me, is the lack of serious criticism of the arts, because art criticism is not in any way related to the market. I've had artists come and tell me, I don't care what you write in the reviews because I'm going to sell nonetheless. And that's been the driving point. So serious criticism, which is taken seriously by the right people, which is going to change the way people look and see things. Perhaps that's the direction contemporary art needs to be going on. And 4 minutes over time, which I think is not too bad. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That's been a most invigorating panel. Thank you, Pinaki, Ratnottama, Adip, Dipali, and Chintan for making this so lively and so exciting. Thank you very much.